They say conspiracy theories are nothing more than rumors, stories best left to late-night whispers and paranoid minds. But what if those whispers were true? What if the shadows were hiding secrets too dangerous to stay buried? History has proven it before. Covert wars, hidden experiments, and plots so sinister they sound like fiction, until the evidence forces us to believe. We've done it before, and we are doing it again tonight. We, the big picture, are pulling back the curtain on US conspiracy theories that turned out to be true. Let's begin. The story of Vietnam's bloodiest war didn't begin in the jungles. It began in the waters of the Gulf of Tonkin in 1964. The official story? A lone destroyer, the USS Maddox, innocently patrolling international seas, was suddenly ambushed by North Vietnamese torpedo boats. Guns roared, torpedoes were fired, and America was attacked without any provocation. At least that's what Washington told the world. But the truth? It was far murkier. The Maddox wasn't some harmless ship. It was on a DeSoto mission, gathering intelligence right off North Vietnam's coast, while South Vietnamese commandos, backed by the US, raided North Vietnamese islands. To Hanoi, it looked like coordinated US aggression. And when 3 patrol boats closed in, Maddox fired first, warning shots the Johnson administration conveniently left out. The so-called unprovoked attack was already a distortion, and the damage done to Maddox? Just one bullet hole in the structure. Yet that scratch became the seed of a narrative. USA under attack. Then came August 4th. Rough seas, confused sonar readings, no boats, no torpedoes. Commander on deck Captain Herrick himself cabled Washington, admitting the reports were doubtful. Pilots flying overhead swore there was nothing but black water. Yet in the White House, uncertainty was erased. The incident was written as fact. President Lyndon Johnson rushed to Congress with a story of 2 attacks. Fear swept the chambers. He told Congress that US ships had been attacked twice. Terrified lawmakers handed him the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, a blank check for war. And from one bullet hole and a phantom battle, America plunged into Vietnam. 58,000 Americans never returned. Millions of Vietnamese perished, all because lies drowned the truth. The Gulf of Tonkin incident may have lit the fuse, but another secret war was already unfolding, this time in the skies. In 1961, under Operation Ranch Hand, US planes unleashed not bombs but chemicals. President John F. Kennedy told the Americans it was just herbicides to strip jungle cover, making it harder for the enemy to hide. But the truth? It was chemical warfare disguised as agriculture. The most infamous of these was Agent Orange, a toxic brew laced with dioxin, one of the deadliest poisons known. Officials downplayed the risks, insisting it was safe. Between 1962 and 1971, American forces sprayed over 20 million gallons of herbicides across Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. That's the equivalent of 30 Olympic swimming pools filled with poison. The US claimed it was only clearing trees. Yet records show food crops were deliberately targeted, starving civilians. By 1970, more than 600,000 people had their food supply destroyed. Forests withered, animals vanished, and rivers turned poisonous. Up to 4 million Vietnamese were exposed, and as many as 3 million suffered illness, cancers, miscarriages, birth defects, and deformities that still haunt families today. US soldiers weren't spared either. Thousands returned home sick, denied for years that their suffering was connected. The truth was buried under official lies. What looked like crop dusting was in fact ecocide, warfare against both nature and humanity. What if everything you read was carefully curated, crafted, guided, and even lied about? In the early Cold War, the CIA allegedly embarked on Operation Mockingbird, not with soldiers, but with words. Leading American journalists were recruited, student groups were funded, front organizations were manipulated. Stories planted in trusted papers weren't just news, they were instruments of influence, shaping what millions believed. The first cracks appeared in 1967, when Ramparts magazine exposed CIA funding of the National Student Association. By 1975, the Church Committee revealed that 50 journalists had official, secret ties to the CIA. Then Carl Bernstein blew the lid off in 1977. Over 400 journalists, including figures from the New York Times and Time, had participated in assignments for the agency, feeding narratives to a public that believed it was reading unbiased truth. These revelations weren't small. They affected the entire nation. Millions of Americans unknowingly consumed manipulated information, shaping perceptions of wars, politics, and the Cold War itself. The truth was deliberately masked, lies were polished as fact. And the hardest question remains, if our most trusted sources can be controlled, how do we ever know what is real and what was fabricated for power? And if the media could be bent by hidden power, what about the government itself? In 1933, long before Vietnam or the CIA scandals, America faced a chilling conspiracy. Wealthy businessmen, terrified of Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal and his move to abandon the gold standard, planned something unthinkable: a coup. They wanted to install a fascist dictatorship, using America's own war veterans as soldiers. And they chose the nation's most trusted general, Smedley Butler, to lead it. Butler, a retired Marine Corps Major General, was approached by Wall Street broker Gerald McGuire with promises of an army of 500,000 men and immense financial backing. The goal? Make Roosevelt a figurehead, while Butler held near absolute power. It was a plot so audacious it could have changed the course of history. Yet Butler refused. He went straight to Congress, testifying under oath before the McCormack-Dickstein Committee. The hearings confirmed it. The plot was real, discussed, and ready to be executed if the financiers deemed it necessary. But no arrests were made. Names of powerful men surfaced, but justice vanished quietly. Though some newspapers initially called it a hoax, the truth was undeniable. For a moment, the United States had teetered on the edge of fascism, and tens of millions of Americans unknowingly hung in the balance. But that wasn't the last time the US government and its agencies did dirty work. In 1975, Americans watched in disbelief as Senator Frank Church held up a strange pistol before Congress. It wasn't a firearm meant for bullets. It was what the CIA called a non-discernible microbinoculator, later remembered as the heart attack gun. The agency claimed it was never used, but what Congress uncovered told a different story. This weapon was built to make murder look like nature. It fired frozen darts laced with saxitoxin, a shellfish poison so lethal it could kill in seconds. The dart was thinner than a hair, leaving only a tiny red mark. Once inside, the toxin dissolved, shutting down the body and mimicking a fatal heart attack. To doctors, it looked perfectly natural. To the CIA, it was the perfect crime. The Church Committee also revealed this weapon was part of MKNOMI, a CIA program that stockpiled enough saxitoxin to kill 5,000 people, despite Nixon's 1969 ban on biological weapons. Officials insisted it was for foreign adversaries, yet the agency had already been caught spying on 10,000 Americans, dosing unwitting citizens with LSD, and plotting assassinations of world leaders from Fidel Castro to Patrice Lumumba. So was the heart attack gun a deterrent or a tool of covert murder? The truth, buried in secrecy, left Americans questioning just how far their government would go. Now, what if we told you the US government knowingly let guns fall into cartel hands? It sounds like a Hollywood thriller, but it's real. Between 2009 and 2011, the ATF ran Operation Fast and Furious, a plan to track firearms bought by criminals and catch high-level cartel bosses. But the system failed catastrophically. Over 2,000 guns, AK-47s, 50 caliber rifles, and semi-automatic pistols were allowed to walk across the border from Arizona into Mexico. The supposed safeguards? Broken. GPS trackers failed, Mexican authorities weren't warned, and agents raising alarms were ignored. And the fallout was deadly. U.S. Border Patrol agent Brian Terry was murdered in 2010, and over 150 people in Mexico were killed or injured with these same weapons. Entire neighborhoods became battlefields for cartels armed with U.S. guns. Whistleblowers went to Congress, but top officials denied knowledge, withheld documents, and downplayed the devastation. So, was it a law enforcement strategy gone wrong, or a cover-up of negligence at the highest levels? The truth remains murky, but the bloodshed is undeniable. Now, imagine a weapon so strange it sounds like a prank. A bomb designed not to kill, but to make enemy soldiers fall in love with each other. In 1994, the United States Air Force considered exactly that. The Wright Laboratory in Ohio drafted a 3-page proposal for a gay bomb, a chemical weapon designed to spread pheromones over enemy troops, spark sexual attraction, and throw a battlefield into chaos. It sounds like a joke, and it was one, because scientifically, it had no chance. No studies have proven that human pheromones can override behavior, and experts have called the idea absurd. Yet the Pentagon admitted the proposal was real, even if it stayed firmly on paper. And the shocking truth emerged after activists filed a Freedom of Information Act request. The leaked documents stunned the public and fueled ridicule, eventually earning the Wright Laboratory a satirical Ig Nobel Peace Prize in 2007. Sure, no one was harmed, and no soldiers were affected. But the gay bomb reveals a darker side of military ambition, a reminder that sometimes the pursuit of an edge in war can border on the absurd, the unethical, and the downright unbelievable. Strange as that plan sounded, the US had already tested far darker ideas, not in a lab, but in the open air over an unsuspecting city. In 1950, the US Navy deliberately sprayed bacteria over San Francisco. Operation Sea Spray, as it was secretly called, released Serratia marcescens and Bacillus globigi into the atmosphere, without warning a single resident. The stated goal? To measure how vulnerable a major city might be to a biological attack. From September 20th to 27th, bacteria drifted from ships offshore, reaching every corner of the Bay Area. Monitoring suggested nearly all 800,000 residents inhaled at least 5,000 particles, enough to infect a person if it had been a deadly pathogen. And the consequences were quite devastating. 11 people developed rare urinary tract infections. 10 recovered. But Edward J. Nevin, recovering from surgery, died just 3 weeks later. Also, pneumonia cases spiked, though the military denied any link. For decades, the public had no idea they were part of a covert experiment. And this was just one among 239 open-air tests conducted by the U.S. Army between 1949 and 1969. Many of these used live bacteria or toxic chemicals, exposing thousands unknowingly, from New York subways to Midwestern skies. And it wasn't until 1977 that the Senate revealed the truth. The Army downplayed illnesses, denied responsibility, and later courts rejected lawsuits. Yet the chilling reality remains. Entire populations became unwitting test subjects in USA's secret pursuit of biological warfare. If our own cities could be treated as test subjects, then what about foreign leaders? Well, the US wasn't only experimenting, it was eliminating. In the 1950s, whispers swirled around Fidel Castro. The CIA launched plot after plot, snipers, exploding cigars, a poison-lined scuba suit, schemes so bizarre they sounded like fiction. At the time, most laughed. Yet decades later, declassified files confirmed the horrifying truth. These attempts were real. Castro survived them all, but estimates suggest he endured dozens, possibly hundreds, of lethal plots. By 1960, Congo's Patrice Lumumba became a target. The CIA, fearing his Soviet ties, dispatched a scientist carrying a deadly virus. It was never used, but Lumumba was overthrown and brutally executed shortly after. Coincidence or calculated design? Thousands mourned his death, while the US claimed plausible deniability. And the pattern continued. 1961, Dominican dictator Rafael Trujillo. 1963, South Vietnam's Ngo Dinh Diem, both removed with CIA backing. By 1973, Chile's Salvador Allende, a democratically elected leftist, was toppled with covert US support and died during the coup. The mid-1970s Senate investigations revealed the shocking scale: systematic political assassinations, coups, and covert eliminations. President Ford's 1976 executive order outlawed political assassination. But the campaigns didn't end there. Thousands of insurgent leaders in Iraq, Pakistan, Somalia, and Yemen were systematically removed. And even today, the shadow of these operations lingers. Covert, relentless, and often disguised as something else entirely. And now, we reach the final secret in our list for this video. Some conspiracy theories seem too wild to believe, yet this one reveals how far the United States went in silence. Right after World War II, the US Army launched a covert program at Edgewood Arsenal, Maryland. Between 1948 and 1975, over 7,000 soldiers were enrolled in what was deceptively called the Medical Research Volunteer Program. On paper, it sounded harmless, volunteers testing protective gear and pharmaceuticals. In reality, it was a laboratory of lies. Soldiers were exposed to more than 250 chemicals, including nerve agents like VX and sarin, psychoactive drugs like LSD, PCP, BZ, and experimental antidotes. And they were told the trials were safe, but that was far from the truth. Many experienced hallucinations, severe disorientation, and involuntary paralysis. Some struggled to march, handle weapons, or read maps under the influence. The program left no follow-up, no medical tracking, and in some cases, files vanished entirely, and soldiers who reported symptoms were ignored. Congress's 1975 investigation revealed coerced participation, minimal consent, and ethically grotesque experimentation. Despite these horrors, the Army claimed no deaths or serious injuries. But veterans reported lasting neurological damage, psychological trauma, and chronic illnesses. Among the 6,720 tested, long-term effects included peripheral neuropathy, cognitive deficits, and possible reproductive harm. And these were done to develop new weapons, psychochemical interrogation methods, and ways to control enemies without mass killing. But the human cost was staggering. Volunteers were treated as data points, not as people. Decades later, lawsuits demanded justice. In 2013, a judge ruled the Army must inform veterans of new health risks. Yet for those who survived, scars, both mental and physical, remain. Edgewood Arsenal was not just a military experiment. It was a calculated deception, a testament to the lengths governments will go in the name of national security. And with this, we close today's chain of dark tales. But make no mistake, these weren't just stories, they were real. All of them. So if this sent chills down your spine, hit like and subscribe to uncover more hidden histories. And don't miss part 1. It dives even deeper into the shadows, revealing stories that are as shocking as they are true.